If you're interested in the idea of home winemaking, you're in good company. People have been making wine at home as long as there's been the idea of home itself. For tens of thousands of years, people have been making not just drinkable wine, but great wine. Hi, I'm Tim Vandergrift, Technical Services Manager for WineExpert. Thanks for joining me today on this video on how to make your own wine. Now, winemaking is a natural process. In fact, if you did nothing more than stuff some grapes into a jar, they'd eventually split, the juice would ferment, and it'd become wine. It'd be a little bit rough and ready. But with the application of some technology, but very little muss and fuss, you can make wine that'll have people saying, "You made this?" Now, don't worry that you don't know much about wine or winemaking. Everybody starts somewhere. Now, we're going to take you through the rest of this video and make sure you understand every step of the way. Here's some quick facts about home winemaking. First, making your own wine is completely safe. Because of the nature of grape juice and the fermentation process, wine is always going to be safer to drink than water. Well, unless you have one more glass than you really need. Second, you can make wine as good or better than the wines commercially available in restaurants and liquor stores. The same premium grapes from top quality vineyards that go into commercial wines go into kits. Places like Dry Creek in Sonoma, Stag's Leap in Napa, and the Stellenbosch in South Africa and Marlborough in New Zealand all supply grapes for WineExpert kits. Finally, it's much simpler and more economical than you might think. In the course of this video, we're going to show how it only takes a couple of hours of time altogether to make 2.5 cases of wine. And the cost of equipment and ingredients will pay for itself in a single batch. What's not to love about a hobby that's fun and inexpensive? Your first step is to visit your local home winemaking retail store. They'll have all the equipment and raw materials you need to take your wine from pitching the yeast right through bottling and labeling. They're also your closest source for answers and advice as you go along. It's a good idea to get to know them. For choosing a kit, pick what you like to drink. Don't worry if you're not yet a big wine aficionado. That doesn't preclude you from knowing your own taste. Do you want a fruity German white, or do you prefer a dry Italian red? Do you order white zin with your chicken salad, or do you want California Cabernet with a ribeye? Make what you like, and you can't go wrong. Once you've decided which wine you want to make, you're going to need some equipment. Here we are with a basic equipment layout. First off, we've got an open primary fermenter with a lid. This has to be about 30 liters to accommodate the fermentation of the wine. Next, we've got a carboy. Essentially, it's just a closed glass bottle where the wine will go into after the primary fermentation is complete. Along with that, you need a bung and an airlock. This is a kind of a one-way valve. You put a little water in here, and it closes off the top of the carboy to allow fermentation gases to come out and to prevent anything from getting into the wine. Next up, you need a stirring implement. A spoon has to be food-grade plastic or stainless steel and long enough to reach the bottom of your vessels. Next up, for measurements, you're going to need a test jar and a hydrometer. This is very important. This will measure the density of the juice and allow you to track the progress of the fermentation. We'll go into that a bit more later. You're also going to need, very importantly, a food-grade thermometer. Now don't worry, these don't contain any mercury, but they're essential for measuring the temperature of the juice to let you know if it's warm enough or too cold for the yeast. You're also going to need a siphon rod, which fits into the carboy and the primary fermenter, and a siphon hose, so you can get things from one vessel to another. You're also going to need a food-grade measuring cup. That's good for mixing things. You're going to need a wine thief, and aside from its name, a wine thief is pretty innocuous. It's a hollow plastic tube used for getting samples through the thin neck of the carboy. In addition to that, you're going to need some cleaners and sanitizers. These are food grade and they're very, very good for winemaking. Be sure to follow the instructions that come with yours. Now, if you were trying to assemble this all by yourself, it could take a little while and you'd have to run around. Fortunately, we've got it all packaged up very neatly in one big box. Okay, now we've got our equipment, we've chosen our wine. Let's go join our friends Julie and Paul as they make wine for the very first time. The first thing you're going to want to do is to read the instructions from beginning to end. Kit wines are highly engineered products with carefully calculated nutrient levels, temperature requirements, timing, racking. If you haven't read the instructions carefully, you might miss something that'll seem obvious in hindsight, but could make your wine experience confusing. This also brings up an important point. When you read the instructions, they might differ from the way we've presented the kit production sequence in the video. Remember, obey your instructions, omitting no detail however slight. We're necessarily genericizing the procedures here a bit to cover as wide array as possible of kits. If your kit instructions have a process or procedure that seem out of sequence, please follow that. It's a guarantee of success. The next step is to get everything ready to use. This means cleaning and sanitizing. Use a good unscented winemaking cleaner. You can't use household cleaners because many of them contain high levels of industrial perfumes, which sink into equipment and stay. They effectively contaminate the plastic and even glass. First, we clean and sanitize the equipment we're going to need for our first procedure: the primary fermenter and lid, spoon, thermometer, hydrometer, test jar, and wine thief. Once the equipment is clean and very well rinsed with water, you can sanitize it. Most winemakers use metabisulfite. It's cheap, fast, and easy. All you need to do is to mix 3 tablespoons, that's about 50 grams, of metabisulfite powder in 1 gallon, that's about 4 liters, of cool water. That's it, it's ready to use. You'll need to dip, sluice, or spray each piece of equipment and let it either drip dry completely or rinse it with clean water. Note that I said spray your equipment. A nifty trick is to put your sulfite solution in a brand new trigger spray bottle, like one of those ones you can get from a garden store for misting plants. A couple of quick spritzes and you've conveniently and easily coated even larger unwieldy objects in your sanitizing solution. If you keep the container of sulfites tightly sealed, it'll last for a couple of months at room temperature before you have to make a fresh batch. Your kit will ask you to record the production code and wine type, either on the instructions or in a winemaking notebook, which is a great idea. That production code is actually printed on a peel-off label that's easy to pull out and paste into your instructions or record book. Recording this information is a crucial step in ensuring the success of your kit. If you have a problem or even just a question about it and call your retailer, the very first thing they're going to ask is, do you have the date code? With that code, WineExpert can tell you everything about that kit and help narrow down any issues you might have. Another good reason to write down this information is the opposite. What if it's really good? Will you remember the name of the kit, the specific brand and type, when it's aged for a year or two? Writing it down in a notebook will also let you record your later impressions of the wine as it ages. Good record keeping will help you repeat successes. One last little thing will make your life easier. You should pre-mark your fermenter at the 23-liter level. If you try to measure by hand using a measuring cup, you're not going to have notably accurate success. Far easier is to take your carboy, fill it up with water right to a level about 2 finger widths below the point where the bottom of the bung will rest when it's inserted. You can then either pour or rack the water into your primary fermenter. And when it's settled down, take a permanent felt marker and draw a line at the 23-liter level. You'll never have to measure it again, and it'll be right every time. Open up the kit box again and check your contents. Some kits not only have more than 1 packet of each type of ingredient, others actually have more than 1 bag of juice. Consult the instructions. A second, usually smaller bag of juice is most likely a sweetening pack to be added to the kit after fermentation is finished. This increases the sugar content to make for an off-dry or even a sweet wine. Put that packet aside with the rest of the ingredients and save it for when it's needed. Your kit requires the addition of bentonite on the first day. Now, if you know a little bit about it, that might seem odd because bentonite is a clearing agent that's normally added to wine after fermentation. But there's a reason for it. When you add bentonite on the first day, it actually helps the yeast to grow faster in the kit. Also, as the wine ferments, the churning action of the fermentation will give the bentonite plenty of work to do as it goes back and forth through the wine. So add it on the first day, just as instructed. Bentonite dissolves very easily and can be simply stirred into 2 liters, which is about a half a gallon, of hot water in the bottom of the primary fermenter. Now, grab your big bag of juice. Most wine kit boxes are marvels of industrial design, with flaps and slots that will allow you to insert the neck of the bag into them, turning the whole thing into an easy pour dispenser. Grab the bag firmly by the neck, carefully pop the cap off the bag. Bag decappers are sold for this purpose, but a bottle opener does an admirable job, or even just a firm kung fu grip. Pour it into the primary fermenter. Try not to splash, because red grape juice stains like crazy, and even white grape juice is pretty sticky. Don't leave any spills behind to attract insects or to breed spoilage organisms. Add 4 liters, or 1 gallon of warm water to the bag to rinse out any remaining juice and add it to the fermenter. Waste not, want not. Top up the fermenter to the 23-liter mark with lukewarm water. Remember, your kit's designed to ferment between 65 and 75 Fahrenheit, 18 to 24 Celsius. If you make your kit up with straight cold tap water, it could be too cool for the yeast to start fermentation. Then you'll be forced to hang around until it warms up enough to pitch the yeast. Stir the juice and water mixture vigorously for a full 30 seconds. This is one area where people tend to fall down. You've got to really stir vigorously. The problem is that the juice and water have wildly different coefficients of viscosity. In normal talk, this means they're a bit like oil and water. They don't want to mix. So you have to get in there and really stir. Otherwise, they could settle out in layers of higher concentration of juice and lower concentration. Now, getting in with a spoon and really being vigorous is good. But if you have trouble with upper body strength or you're simply tired of all that stirring, you can use a drill-mounted stirring whip. They work great. And you don't have to worry if it looks like you're getting a little bit of air into the juice. That actually helps the yeast to ferment more effectively right from the beginning. So get in there, stir really hard. Now, grab your sanitized wine thief and use it to draw a sample of the juice. Put it into the test jar and use your hydrometer to check the specific gravity. Reading a hydrometer is a snap. Just look across the surface of the liquid it's floating in and read the numbers on the lines right at the level of the juice. Whatever you do, don't put the hydrometer in the bucket and try to read it there. You'd have to look down over the lip of the bucket, and that'll give you a false reading. The gravity should read between 1070 and 1090 depending on the wine type. Your instructions will tell you what gravity to expect. Be sure to record this wherever you've put the kit code and type. It's important to take and record this reading. Not only is it the only way you can accurately gauge the progress of fermentation, it's going to tell you your alcohol content when the wine is finished. More on that later. If your kit contains an ingredient pack that needs to be added to the must, oak powder or oak chips or elderflowers, tear open the packages and sprinkle them into the primary fermenter with the must. If your kit has more than one package of each ingredient, be sure to add them all. To keep costs down, sometimes there's only one size of package, such as a 30-gram or 1-ounce package of oak, so more packages are added to the kit rather than making a separate, bigger package. Be sure to stir them under the surface of the liquid, but don't worry if they float to the top a bit. They'll get wine-logged and sink after a day or two. Ensure that the temperature of the juice is within the specified range. That's usually 18 to 24 degrees Celsius, 65 to 75 Fahrenheit. Colder than this, the yeast will be very slow to start and the fermentation may take longer than specified in the instructions. Warmer than this and the yeast might produce some off flavors. If it's too cold or too hot, often simply leaving the must at room temperature for several hours will be sufficient to bring it into range. Whatever you do, don't pitch the yeast until the temperature is correct. Finally, open your package of yeast and sprinkle it onto the surface of the juice. You don't have to stir the yeast in. They know what they're doing. Once the yeast is in place, cover the primary fermenter and place it in your fermenting area at a temperature of around 18 to 24 degrees Celsius, 65 to 75 Fahrenheit. Now, if your primary fermenter lid has a hole in it for an airlock and bung, be sure to put them in and remember to fill your airlock with water. You should see visible signs of fermentation within 24 to 48 hours. If you don't panic. Instead, grab your hydrometer and check the gravity reading. If it's moved downward at all, things are happening as they should. Wait the specified amount of time in the instructions and get ready for the next step. After 5 to 7 days, the kit is ready to move from the primary fermenter to the carboy. You'll need to clean, sanitize, and rinse your siphon rod, hose, hydrometer and test jar, wine thief, carboy, bung, and airlock. Rinse well. The first step is to check your gravity. We want to rack the wine when it hits 1010 or less. Draw a sample of the juice and use your hydrometer and test jar to check it. The lower your fermenting temperature has been, the longer it will take to hit this gravity. If your gravity is not at or below this level, you'll have to wait before proceeding. Test the gravity each day until you're sure. Ensure the primary fermenter is up at least 3 feet on a sturdy table or shelf. Carefully siphon the wine into a clean, sanitized 23-liter carboy. You'll notice that Paul and Julie are using the classic siphon technique of sucking on the end of a hose to get things started. If you just can't seem to get the hang of this, or you wind up getting an accidental drink every time you do it, there's a nifty little gadget you can use to move things along. This is an auto siphon. It works a little bit like a bicycle pump. Once you've got it cleaned and sanitized, simply insert it into the carboy or primary fermenter, just like a regular siphon rod. Give it a couple of pumps, and the one-way valve will ensure the wine flows smoothly and easily from one container to another. One more hint for racking. You want to take most of the liquid from the carboy, so don't leave too much behind, just the solid stuff. A good technique is to use a doorstop, a small piece of 2x4 board, or even a brick to prop up the front edge of the fermenter as you're racking. This will make sure you get your fair share of wine transferred over, and that you don't need to use excessive amounts of water for topping up later. Attach an airlock and bung to the carboy. Remember, fill your airlock halfway up with water. Replace the carboy in the fermentation area until the next stage, around 10 days later. At this point, the wine is almost finished fermenting, but the yeast still has work to do. If it smells a bit yeasty and sharp, don't worry, it's going to turn out just fine. After waiting the specified period in the instructions, it's time to use your thief to draw a sample and check it with your hydrometer. Make sure you look in the instructions and that reading is correct. A little lower than specified is okay, but higher isn't. If you start to stabilize a wine before it's finished fermenting, you could have all kinds of problems. So draw the sample and make sure you test it. Looks good. If you want to know your alcohol content, now is the time to calculate it. Look up your initial specific gravity from where you've written it down, subtract the gravity reading you just took, and then multiply the result by 131. For example, if your starting gravity was 1.090 and your finishing gravity was 0.995 at fining and stabilizing, the difference between the two is 1.095. Discard the 1 to the left of the decimal place and multiply the result, 0.095 times 131. The answer is 12.445, or roughly 12.5% alcohol by volume. This is by far the easiest and most accurate way to determine the actual alcohol content of your home wine. Congratulations! It's wine! Check your instructions and gather up your additives. There are 2 stabilizers, metabisulfite and sorbate, and a fining agent, either isinglass or chitosan. Keep in mind there might be more than one package of each of them. If there are, be sure to add them all. By far the best way to add the finings and stabilizers is to dissolve them in about a half a cup of cool water. This makes sure they're completely dissolved before they go into the wine. The stabilizers and additives need to be added separate from each other. It would be more convenient to just dump everything in at once, but the fining agents would glom up with the stabilizers and render them ineffective. So be sure to add both stabilizers first, stir them vigorously for 2 minutes, and then add the finings. This is where the drill-mounted whip is really going to come in handy. Unless you've got arms like tree trunks, you'll appreciate the convenience and ease of using the whip to degas. Remember, how well the wine clears and how good it tastes is going to depend on getting all the gas out. If you don't have a drill-mounted stirring whip, go back and stir by hand a lot. Keep that stirring up. This section is for those wines that came with an F-Pack or Seuss Reserve Pack. If your kit doesn't contain one, go ahead and hit the chapter button on your player and skip this bit. It's mainly white wines that come with F-Packs, so that's why this isn't a red wine. Make sure there's room in your carboy for the contents of the pack. You may need to remove a couple of cups, around 500 milliliters of wine, for this purpose. Reserve this wine for topping up the carboy at the end of the fining and stabilizing process. Shake the bag, carefully remove the cap, and gently pour the contents into the carboy. Finally, shake up the contents of the fining packages, which is chitosan or isinglass. Carefully cut open the corner of the pouch or pouches. There may be more than one. Check your instructions. Pour contents into your carboy. Stir vigorously for another 2 minutes to drive off the carbon dioxide gas. Alright, at this point, top up the carboy within 2 inches of the bottom of the bung to reduce the amount of surface area of wine exposed to the atmosphere. This will reduce the exposed area of wine that could pick up oxygen and spoil. You can use cool water or reserved wine from the F-Pack step if you've got that available. Finally, ensure the airlock is filled halfway with water and reattach the bung and airlock to the carboy. Put the carboy back in your fermenting area and wait the specified number of days, usually a couple of weeks, for the wine to clear. At the end of the specified clearing period, check to make sure your wine is brilliantly clear. The best way to do this is to use your clean, sanitized wine thief to pull a glassful of wine from the carboy. Take the glass into a darkened, but not completely dark, room and shine the beam of a flashlight through it. Don't look into the flashlight because all you'll see is little spots in front of your eyes. Instead, look at the beam of light passing through the wine. You shouldn't actually be able to see the beam itself if the wine is truly clear. If you do see the flashlight beam, that means tiny particles in the wine are reflecting light as it passes through the wine, scattering them and making the beam visible, kind of like dust motes in a sunny room. If your wine is clear, you can proceed to bottling. If it isn't, whatever else you do, don't bottle it. Cloudy wine doesn't magically improve in the bottle, and eventually it'll throw sediment and may change in flavor or aroma over time. Patience and time are the 2 best antidotes for a cloudy wine. You're going to need 30 bottles and 30 corks to finish your wine. Now, you don't have to buy new bottles, but if you're going to recycle old bottles, they need a thorough cleaning. Soak them overnight in a winemaking detergent, and get a good brush to scrub all the goo out. After that, you're going to need to rinse them. If you have a sink-mounted sprayer, that makes it a lot more convenient. Clean recycled bottles, and even brand new bottles, need to be sanitized with your metabisulfite solution before you use them. While you could do this by pouring a cup of sulfite solution from bottle to bottle, a much better answer is to use an avvinatore and a scolabottigile. Those are funny Italian words for bottle sulfiter pump and bottle draining tree. As you can see, Paul has the bottles rinsed and drained in no time. If you're ever stuck for a gift for your favorite winemaker, these are wonderful. While some folks use hand corkers, which rely on brute power to force corks into a bottleneck, a real treat is an Italian or Portuguese floor corker. These babies make corking as easy as pie, with their self-adjusting bottle platforms and great mechanical advantage. Many shops will loan or rent floor corkers out for a nominal fee. Another helpful tool is a bottling wand, an acrylic rod that attaches to the end of the siphon hose with a little needle valve on the end. It'll allow you to fill the bottles just by dipping the wand into the bottom of the bottle, and it reduces splashes and dripping. They're not expensive, and they really beat using a hose clamp or your thumb to control the flow of wine into the bottles. Clean and sanitize your siphon rod, hose, and siphon filler. Rinse well. Now, if you're concerned about disturbing the sediment in the bottom of the carboy while you're bottling, you can clean and sanitize a primary fermenter, or even another carboy, rack the wine into it, and bottle from there. Siphon your wine into bottles. Make sure to leave 2 finger widths of space between the bottom of the cork and the level of the wine in each bottle. If you don't leave enough space, the cork might come popping back out. Too much space and the air in the bottle could oxidize the wine. Seal it with a good quality cork. Leave the bottles upright for 3 days before laying them down on their sides for aging. This allows the corks to seal completely. Store the bottles in a dark, cool, temperature-stable place. Your retailer will have a selection of attractive labels and capsules that will give your wine a very attractive finished look. Some are even customizable with space for printed messages for gifts and important dates like weddings or anniversaries. The best trick for putting a capsule on top of a wine bottle is to shrink them on with the steam from a kettle. You could use a hairdryer, but that's pretty slow. And a hot air paint stripper works great, but I always wind up scorching the counter. Kettles really do work very quickly and very well. And that's it. You're officially a winemaker. Try and wait at least a month before you open the first bottle. And remember, in 6 months it's going to improve a lot. And some of the wines will take at least a year before they show their best. But the first time you try it, you're going to be proud to say, I made this. Cheers.